right. Welcome to the Royale Bar here during the day. As you guys know, I'm only usually open at nights, Thursday through Sunday, but I'm having a special interview today during our private time here. We are still in a great pandemic, so who better to talk to than a barman like myself, of course joined in with my friends Isaiah and Mark, who often are just drinking here at the bar like regular, wonderful people, but they actually have a little extras insight on what we're doing. Guys, I'll start with you, Isaiah. Why don't you tell these folks who you are and why it might be relevant to listen to you guys during this crazy pandemic.
Yeah, so I'm Isaiah Turnbull. I'm a trauma surgeon and a critical care doctor at Barnes Hospital. And then I also have a basic science research lab, and we work on the immunology of critical illness. So what goes wrong with your immune system when you're very sick or in the intensive care unit, which nobody was very interested in 2 years ago, but suddenly in the last year has become very, very interesting. And I've been a patron of the Royale for a long time.
Yes, for many years.
I'm Mark Hoofnagle. I'm also a trauma surgeon in critical care. Just like Isaiah, we're partners in the same division at Barnes. I also have a PhD in molecular physiology. I do basic science research, often in collaboration with Isaiah. And I also have a little bit of background in disinformation and misinformation.
Yeah, well, that seems to be a very important thing that we're dealing with right now, because I've been vaccinated. Pretty much everybody around me has been vaccinated. But we all know a person or two, or maybe more than that, that haven't quite made that jump, which seems to just the person that, and where I am, seems to make perfect sense to protect yourself with science-based things. But there's a lot of challenges with that. It's easier for me to just say, what's the hell's wrong with people? But there's more to it than that. And I understand a lot of social issues as well, being in the bar business and people's their finer edges, which is a very interesting place to observe it, and not as much on the science. But you guys really understand the science, and now that you're having to deal with more of the social aspect of it as well. What challenges do we have right now in your hospitals and what you're dealing with?
Yeah, well, first to start, I'm vaccinated. I got the vaccine as soon as I could. I urged my family to get the vaccine and got the vaccine as soon as they could. And despite the fact that a lot of people have gotten vaccinated, we're seeing a big resurgence of COVID among unvaccinated people. We had, our low point for COVID was, I think, 2 months ago, and since it was mid-May that we haven't had a huge increase, but we've had an increase in COVID cases, and almost all of them among unvaccinated people. And that's really my biggest concern, is trying to convey the best information I can about this vaccine, because I think it's the best way to protect people, to protect my friends, for my friends to protect themselves, for my family to protect themselves. And, I haven't seen a sick person in the hospital who's been vaccinated.
Right. I was on call Friday and Sunday of this weekend, and I can kind of tell when the COVID numbers are going up, because what happens is the trauma patients start coming in and their COVID screenings start popping up. And this weekend was the first time in a long time that I had a bunch of people that were basically COVID asymptomatic there for a different reason, there because of trauma, and we were finding out that they were COVID too. And I think we focus a lot on the mortality statistics with COVID, and those are awful. But the other thing to remember is that COVID, a significant portion of people are showing long-term symptoms, and we're already looking and projecting that this is going to be extremely costly for years to come in terms of injury to people's health, in terms of medical expenditures. There's lots of reasons to get it, and it's not just living or dying. This is a disease that's causing a lot of chronic illness, permanent injury to lungs. We've been able to show that in the loss of sense of smell, that's it traveling along, your cranial nerves right to your brain. The cardiac symptoms, people show myocardial inflammation. One study of Penn State football players showed that 30% of players that got it, even the ones who are asymptomatic, about 30% of them, you put them in MRI, you could see they had cardiac inflammation. Now, these are organs I would prefer never to have, inflamed by anything. It's a bad disease. It causes permanent injury to a large number of people who survive. So just the survival numbers aren't going to tell the whole story, and we're going to be dealing with it for years to come. So to protect yourself for now and for the future, because as long as we have unvaccinated people, we're risking allowing this to become endemic, and something that could, potentially have waves like this over and over and over again, to the point where the choice is going to be, you're either going to get vaccinated or you're going to get COVID. And you don't want COVID. It's a bad disease. We've seen, we see the absolute worst of it in the ICU. People, dying alone in the hospital on vents, not able to talk to anybody. It's a terrible, terrible disease.
Ooh. How about the people that, some level of positivity, how damaging has it been to patients that have gotten the vaccine? Inflammations,
People who've gotten sick.
people have gotten sick,
After they've
because
been vaccinated.
people that has happened. People are testing positive who have gotten the vaccine.
Yeah, that it's somewhere between 15 to 25% of people who get COVID have had the vaccine. So that there's several challenges to that. One of those is what do we mean when we say somebody has COVID? So the patients that I see when I see my critically ill patients in the hospital, those patients who have COVID are patients who are intubated and they're on a ventilator, they're not able to breathe on their own, and those are the sickest patients. And certainly that's what we all think of when we think of these, this terrible disease. But there's also a lot of testing for COVID. So when you talk about people who've been vaccinated and then they have COVID, a lot of those patients have just very minor symptoms, and because the testing's routinely available, they get tested and they have a positive test. But I haven't seen any seriously ill patients who are seriously ill with COVID who've been vaccinated. And as far as I know, there have been a countable number of vaccinated patients who've gotten critically ill. You might have a positive test. You might have some symptoms, minor symptoms of a cold, but we're seeing a very different disease with COVID in the vaccinated folks from the unvaccinated folks. So you're both much less likely to get COVID, either have symptoms or have a positive test, and extremely unlikely to get very sick with it. Unlike what we see with the unvaccinated, who are at a risk of becoming critically ill, having long-term symptoms, not getting better.
Yeah, I have seen no severe COVID among the vaccinated so far, and the folks that have been coming in that are asymptomatic. I think we're gonna see some more asymptomatic infections in people who have been vaccinated, because we are still appropriately testing and monitoring for this, because it's still a pandemic, still ongoing, and we need to do what we can to try to prevent its continued spread. And that's encouraging other folks to get vaccinated, because that's our choice right now. You're going to get vaccinated or you're going to get COVID, and it's way better to get just one protein from this virus that's given to you in a controlled way that isn't going to make you systemically ill and isn't going to make you permanently injured, than it is to risk getting that protein plus all the other ones the virus makes and landing you in the ICU and all the risk that entails.
Now, we've seen a lot of issues here with, we've pretty much gotten to a certain point of vaccinations, and it's available to everybody.
Yeah, everybody over 11, I believe,
can get it, and there's been no real hurdles in getting access to the vaccine that I know.
And there's no cost.
Right.
You can
free.
go to your pharmacy, you can ask for the shot, and they're glad to give you a shot.
Right. And so, but the numbers of people getting the vaccine is sort of leveled out. It's not really increasing, sort of stagnant at this point.
Yeah.
What have you found have been the holdups of people? There seems to be all sorts of information out there that doesn't seem to line up really with some of this reasoning. I'm just trying to understand better, why is it leveled out? Why aren't people getting the vaccine?
No, people avoid vaccination for a number of reasons. Some of it is complacency, some of it is distrust of institutions, some of it is distrust of medicine, some of it is certain ideologies that make you kind of more resistant to the idea of participating in any kind of collective behavior there's kind of a very pathological individualistic attitude that runs as a strain through the United States, where you're looking out for yourself and you owe nothing to anybody else. And I think that feeds some of the most malignant stuff. I'm very understanding of folks who are cautious and worried about side effects, and especially folks that have had negative interactions with the medical system in the past that are real existing issues like with structural racism in this country and distrust of the medical system. But I think that what's underlying a lot of the disinformation that we're getting from Fox and OANN, Newsmax, and these ideologically motivated actors is that they see the vaccine as a success of a kind of ideology that they disapprove of. And that's the idea that we're not all individuals, we're actually working often as a collective together to help each other and accomplish goals. And I think when you're ideologically opposed to ever having people work together as a group, as a society, and you're constantly trying to undermine those goals, the extreme efficacy of something like a vaccine is really kind of a threat to your worldview. And I think that's what feeds into why they are interested in doing it, because it certainly isn't for the health of their viewers. It certainly isn't because they themselves haven't been vaccinated, because they've all been vaccinated.
Also, it's a policy, I do
It is
believe.
a policy. They have all been vaccinated. But what they don't want to see is a big, free government program solve a problem. And I think that's fundamentally threatening to that worldview. And that's probably a source of why they're doing it. And I think we got to push back against that, because it's when have your politics fine, but when it's conflicting with public health is something that really can only be addressed collectively. You cannot fight your own individual war with a global pandemic. It's just not realistic. You need to help other people, and you need other people to help you, and we need to protect each other, and that's the way that we're going to get through it. And from other kind of conservative and business side angles, I mean, they should want businesses should want to be able to reopen and have their employees be safe and their customers be safe and to open more fully. And we're just not going to get there, and we're going to continue to have these waves until there's enough people vaccinated that we're not constantly dealing with waves and waves of variants.
It also, accessing the healthcare system is difficult in this country, and I work at a trauma center, and I take care of critically injured people who come in, and part of the reason that I find that work rewarding is that, Mark and I take care of the folks who come in independent of anything else. We're not interested in anything except for what's wrong with them, and that's why we work at a trauma center taking care of critically ill patients. And for other types of healthcare, it's hard to get in. It's hard to get in for elective procedures. It's hard to get in for preventative care. But this is easy. This vaccine is available wherever you want to get it in multiple different care environments. You can just go to a pharmacy, the pharmacy at the grocery store. You can go to your primary care doctor and get a referral. A lot of the healthcare facilities have vaccination programs. So I hope that people see that this is different than trying to, God forbid, get a primary care doctor. Good luck getting a primary care doctor.
Tell me about it.
Especially during a pandemic.
During a pandemic. But this is easy, and so I think some of the difficulty that part of the reason people haven't gotten the vaccine is they perceive that it might be difficult because the healthcare system is difficult to access. But this isn't. This is available, and so I think people getting that message out that they can get this shot wherever is good for them. It is just universally available.
So trying to, we were talking a little bit about the almost.
Hey guys, what's going on?
Hey, what's up, Chief? How you doing?
Thought you gotta be going. I saw a couple cars out there.
Yeah, we are. We're doing
We're
a.
live on the internet right now. You can jump down there. You need a beer?
Yeah,
Oh, we'll get you a beer real quick.
yeah, but I don't want to be on the internet.
You want to say hi to the world?
This is Chief George right here.
Chief Sherman George
He's
is here. Stop by. He comes by for lunch.
He's kept a lot of people safe over the years himself with the fire department.
Another public servant.
That's right. Well, we can grab a beer, Bill, if you like.
Yeah, I'll grab you a beer if you want.
We're not going to be here too much
Yeah.
long.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, this is still an active bar, which is there's still joy in our lives at times, even though we're talking about very serious things here. with a lot of people still getting sick. But I was getting to about like sort of like there seems to be almost like we're dealing with a mentality, maybe a psychology, trying to, let's say if we have somebody we know who's resistant to getting a vaccine that's a prime candidate really needs to get this vaccine, which is basically almost everybody. What can we do as their friend, their family, to try to help? I mean, of course we're going to drive them. Of course we can show them where it is. It's all over the place. You can get these shots. But how do we approach that with some people?
For me, I think understanding that these vaccines are incredibly effective. There's several different vaccines that are available. There's vaccines that use technology that's been around for, tens of years in the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And then there's vaccines that are using technology that's been around, but this is a more novel application of it that honestly, as a scientist, I think is better technology. I think the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine are using this where we just give people the single protein. So you're not getting a whole bunch of different stuff from this virus. You're just getting the single thing that will make the single gene that will make your body immune to it. My analogy is that the old vaccines are like getting your alcohol from beer, right? We're just going to put some grain in a bucket and we're going to ferment it and we're going to add some hops to give it flavor and we're going to drink that liquid. These new vaccines are like vodka. It's a much cleaner delivery system. We're just, fishing out the thing that is going to be to get you the effect if what you're looking for from your beverages is the effect of alcohol. And so, but you have this range, and get the Johnson vaccine, get the Pfizer, get the Moderna. These are all incredibly effective, and I don't know how to convince people that there is an alternative to getting sick, to being stuck at home on quarantine, to being in the hospital, to having long-term side effects. Like, you don't have to do this. You can get a very benign shot with a tiny little needle, and it's like 5 weeks total for your whole sequence of getting your shot, getting your second shot, getting complete immunity, and be protected from this.
I think for your other point, like how to specifically address your family members, we know that folks that have kind of fallen into kind of a disinformation system, we know that they're very resistant to changing their minds about it. And often you're not going to win by arguing with them and just giving them the information isn't enough, because we all have the information. We all have Google. The problem is we have too much information. We have disinformation. We have a glut of disinformation. And that disinformation gives a lot of people kind of permission to do things that maybe they wouldn't do if they were operating on the best information, or they're operating on what their friends and the family and their loved ones would want them to do. So to kind of bring people back from that brink, you can't always rationally get people out of an irrational position that they got into for irrational reasons. So what you can do, though, is you can emphasize your relationship with them. And if you do have a connection to somebody and you make it clear that you want this for them because you care about them, those things are important. It's like, I want you to be part of our group. I want you to be able to come to our bar and drink with us, but, you're doing something that's unsafe. It makes us all unsafe. I'd really prefer for you to do this to make us all safe, make me feel better, and make me feel better about, you being around and, being friends with us. I mean, we passed a rule in our house that we have kids that aren't old enough to be vaccinated yet, so you can't come into my house without being vaccinated.
Yeah.
Not that my grandparents were difficult, but I'd be saying you want to see grandkids, you got to be vaccinated.
We have some comments in the chat, in the comments section on Facebook. This one is, and this is maybe an opportunity to sort of maybe dispel some misinformation. There's Samuel F. Moore puts this in the chat. He said there's a 99% survival rate. Your DNA altering vaccine claims a 95 effective rate. Stop lying.
That's a fascinating piece of
Internet.
yeah. What are you going to do?
Here's another one. Same guy. They don't stop. Or, I think he's talking about the vaccines. Don't stop you from getting the infection, and they do not increase the 99% survival rate. Stop using this flat.
So this is all false, and we should actually be careful because like even like just kind of repeating false information actually is harmful because it continues to spread it. The vaccine does prevent infection. All vaccines do not have 100% efficacy, but they all prevent infection to various degrees. This one is extremely effective at 95%. We wish other vaccines before this had been as good as these vaccines. These are excellent in terms of the technology that they're providing and the durable immunity that they're providing. It is true that as the virus has continued to mutate in the unvaccinated population, that we have a variant that may be showing a little bit less efficacy, but the available vaccines are still extremely efficacious against this variant. And then the other thing to remember is that when people say, 99% of people are fine, 1% of the United States population is 6 million people. That's a lot of people to die. And they're eventually all going to get infected or they're all going to get vaccinated. And so if 1%, this is a terrible number of people to basically just write off. And it's kind of madness to say that. We care about every life. And 1% of large numbers is enormous numbers in this country. It's enormous numbers worldwide. This isn't just a cold. Nothing else has had this kind of level of transmissibility and mortality in any of our lifetimes. And I think it's frankly heartless to use numbers like that, and people should be discouraged from kind of frankly being sociopathic.
There have been I don't want to say that there's been 0 deaths from among vaccinated folks, but there are literally a countable number. Most of the data I've seen and most of the physicians that I've talked to, my personal experience in talking to people who work in COVID ICUs is that they don't have any significantly critically ill vaccinated people. When we talk about the efficacy of a vaccine, we're talking about people getting a little bit sick, right? So that 95% efficacy is people getting some symptoms, or even for the Delta variant, we're talking about 86% effective. So 86% of the people who are vaccinated and who are exposed to COVID are fine. 14% of them, they have some symptoms. They get a little bit of a cold. They don't wind up critically ill, being taken care of in an intensive care unit. So that 95% isn't, when we talk about a 1% mortality, which that's a high number, but that 95% is getting sick, and that 1% is dying. Those are very different things. It's very different to talk about preventing almost everybody from dying and most people from even getting sick. And then we can talk a little bit about the basic molecular biology here. This vaccine, so the Johnson & Johnson vaccine uses old technology that we've been using for a long, long time, where we use a benign virus and we have that virus deliver the protein or the gene to make the protein to your body. The mRNA vaccines are delivering the mRNA, but the analogy I use is if your DNA, your genome, is your personal music collection, it's all the music that you have, that you own, that is yours, that kind of defines your music collection. This mRNA vaccine is like going out to a show and listening to live music, right? It's related, it's both music, but it's not the same thing. It's not permanent storage. It's just something that comes in and it impacts you, just like if you listen to your music collection, but you don't keep it. It makes a memory,
Yeah.
but you're not this.
Same as you don't keep what you get from COVID either, which is the crazy thing, because
Right.
It's like, what do you think a virus is doing
Yeah.
if not hijacking the genetics of your cell?
Yeah.
Except it's also going to make a whole bunch of other things, and it's
Right.
also going to make you hella sick, and it's also going to help you infect other
And
people.
if anything
So
is
it's
going to
just
get
completely
incorporated,
bonkers
if
idea.
anything is going to get incorporated into your genome, it's the infecting virus.
It's the
live
infecting
infecting
virus,
virus could possibly, but this single sequence of nucleic acids that it's literally just telling your body to make a single protein so that your body can recognize this virus when they see it.
And then it fades because mRNA just doesn't have a very long half-life in your system.
I spent a lot of my life like trying to keep mRNA.
Yeah, it's
mRNA
hard
from
to keep
degrading.
mRNA
It's
around.
a
Yeah,
real
it's a real pain.
Yeah, and it's hard to
So,
change DNA.
And it's extremely hard to change DNA.
We've been working on that for
if
50,
we
60
actually
years.
had a way to do that, that's another like Nobel. Oh, I could give you a shot and change your DNA. You know, this is a home run.
This is a win.
Yeah.
This is a win.
I wish it were so simple.
This is not in chat, but this is something I see frequently. Something I've seen recently that maybe you guys can speak to. One of the anti-vax theories going around now is that how's it go now? The mRNA vaccines will cause the virus to get more virulent.
So this is also false. So the way that you prevent viruses from becoming more virulent is you prevent them from replicating in people and having opportunities to mutate to forms that are more harmful. We are hemming this in with the vaccine to give it fewer and fewer opportunities to have people to infect and mutate within. Now there is a question of is it possible that this would exert a selective pressure to try to find variants that are more infectious? And the answer is no. It's not letting it significantly into people who have it. So as long as you're crowding it down, you're not giving it a replicated pathway where it's going to like take off. No, you're crowding this thing into a narrower and narrower set of people where it's going to be allowed to mutate in and be far less likely. Now, yeah, is it possible if we allow things to continue to mutate to have one evade the vaccine? Yes, but that's why it's important that we, as a whole, decide to get together and get vaccinated to crowd it down to the smallest point possible where it can't jump anymore and can't mutate anymore. That is the tried and true method to kind of basically surround and drown this problem.
If you look at when people have COVID and they're sick, that's when this virus is actively replicating in their body. That's what's making them sick. So unvaccinated,
extremely high copy number.
Right. And so when you're the unvaccinated who get sick and they're fighting this thing for days to weeks to months, and so that virus during all that time is mutating in their body and changing. When you have the vaccine, even if you're exposed to the virus, the way that vaccines work is they prepare your body to fight it. So even the best vaccine, when you're exposed to the virus, your body has to make an immune response to kill that virus. And so when you're vaccinated and you're exposed to COVID, some people get just a very limited transient infection for a couple of days. They get a runny nose. That's that 14% of people who are vaccinated who are exposed to the Delta variant, this terrible variant. And that vaccine is mutating or is replicating, but just a little bit because your body's able to kill it, to get rid of it, and to clear it. Where the risk of mutation comes is when that virus is actively replicating in an unvaccinated host for days or weeks while that patient's critically ill. The risk of mutation is in the unvaccinated.
Oof.
It's a numbers game.
Yeah.
So I have some questions that were thrown out before when I just announced this. My buddy Bob Donnell also loves sitting at this bar. The continued efficacy of these vaccines, like how are they holding up? Do you know how long do you think that it looks like they're going to hold up?
Very well so far.
Yeah.
I mean, we hope this continues, but I mean, the fact that we are seeing any decrease, like we see with Delta, where maybe there's been about a 5 or 10% drop off is concerning, because that suggests as time goes on, the virus will evolve and become different enough in the vaccine efficacy that we'll lose it. But at the same time, one of the great things about this new technology is that we would be able to generate boosters relatively quickly. The actual design of this, especially like of the Moderna one, is very interesting. Once they had the published sequence, they had their designed mRNA fusion molecule designed within 24 hours, and they were waiting for basically an opportunity like this to trial this technology, and they basically within 24 hours had it from design and then going into their production system for basically initial safety tests and things. So unlike previous vaccines, which have required molecular cloning or passage through cells and things in order to try to generate vaccines over the course of months, like what we do for the flu each year, and we try to predict what the dominant strain is, this allows us an almost like real-time monitoring of like genetic profile through sequencing and then potential more refined responses. Now, we haven't done that yet, but the potential is there in the technology. that this is going to improve. This has actually been a big leap forward in terms of vaccine efficacy and speed and efficiency of design.
And we expect that there'll be durable immunity from these vaccines. We're scientists, and so we'll always want the data to before we know the answers. But there's several different things that you can look at when you say, well, are these vaccines going to protect us for long periods of time? So people have been getting vaccinated since about October, November, December.
December is really when it really rolled out. Yeah.
And since then, as vaccines have rolled out, we've seen a decrease in the numbers. So that suggests that if it was transient, they wouldn't be durable, but it has been durable for the last we're talking about 6-7 months now. We can look at molecular things. People talk about antibody titers for the spike protein, and that's just a thing we measure. But that doesn't mean that it's the only thing, right? It's like trying to judge how much money's in somebody's bank account by what kind of car they drive. It's a measure, but it's not the measure. So your immune system's complicated, and so we use this spike antibody titer, and we can follow that, and we know that that's up for 3 to 6 months with vaccination. But it's likely that your immune system will still be able to respond to this virus in an ongoing way. And as long as people aren't getting sick, as long as we see decrease in the COVID numbers, that's good evidence that there's durable immunity from this vaccination. So there has been talk about, do we need to do a booster? That talk came kind of from the companies who were looking at their data. That talk is based on antibody titers, and we don't know. That it may come that in the future we need to do boosters, but right now there's no evidence that anybody needs any additional shots, any additional vaccination, that the vaccine regimen that we have is effective and durable.
This also feeds into some confusion that people have about the difference between kind of natural and vaccine-mediated immunity, both of which are natural forms of immunity, by the way. Natural is a word that means different things to different people. But usually in this case what they mean is immunity generated from being infected by the virus. And people have a misperception that natural is automatically better, or that, which is crazy because this is nature trying to kill us, at its most pure. But that type of immunity would actually be better, and there's actually a number of reasons why it isn't. Vaccine immunity, and for one thing, is much cleaner. It is focused on a single protein, and it's actually been shown to create a stronger and more durable immune response than being infected by the virus itself. The other thing is that people confuse the hygiene hypothesis with viral infection, where we hear that, you build up and strengthen your immune system by exposing yourself to things. And that's true of allergens and maybe some GI bugs and things like that, but it is not true of viral infection. Viral infection hurts you. And a number of ways that viral infections hurt you is actually by attacking your immune system in order to take advantage of your body and hijack its machinery. It will often attack the immune system to do so. Measles famously just wipes out your memory B cells.
Yeah.
So you just lose your immunity to everything you've seen before. It actually is like the classic immune weakener. And afterwards, you will get reinfected with things that you'd previously seen, because that's one of the ways that measles gets you. So when we started vaccinating for measles worldwide, we saw this huge drop-off in child mortality that was not explained by just preventing measles alone. And there was, these great articles that came out in Science in the early 2010s, and shows because infection by measles wrecked your immune system. It destroys it. So viruses are not included in this kind of general idea of expose yourself to allergens, hygiene hypothesis stuff. No, viruses attack your immune system. It's how they get us.
Yeah. The hygiene hypothesis, talking about having your immune system be stronger because you're exposed to dirt or pathogens or pets, that a lot of that is about your autoimmunity, your immune system attacking your own tissues because your immune system is, has stuff.
Truly, it's weakening your immune system to tell it to stop attacking so much.
Yeah, exactly. But for this, and then people say, well, why did we get this vaccine so quickly? And that's the other thing, is that the SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus is, in the scheme of viruses, a relatively simple virus. It's much simpler than, say, influenza that has 2 chromosomes and a lot of genetic material. It's completely different than something like cancer, which isn't an infectious disease. It isn't something that you can easily, cancer is a whole spectrum of diseases that involve all kinds of different cells and tissue, whereas the SARS-CoV-2 is just a very, very specific thing, and our scientists were able to identify the genetic sequence and make a specific virus for it, or a specific vaccine for it. So we're lucky that SARS-CoV-2 was such a simple virus. We're lucky that it's not a more complex virus, a herpes types virus that would be much more difficult to make such an effective, rapid vaccine. It's really just luck that we had this virus that popped up with this technology that we could fix it.
Yeah. Although I think there's a huge advantage to this technology. It gives us the possibility of making things like multivalent flu vaccines.
Absolutely.
It's gonna change things. It's gonna be good.
Yep.
Oh. Well, I like hearing some good news and all this.
There's a question that came up in the comments. I don't know if you want to address this or not.
Sure.
It's about the AstraZeneca vaccine. Somebody said that they were vaccinated overseas with the AstraZeneca, and there was some bad press around the AstraZeneca. They want to know whether they should be worried about that vaccine.
The AstraZeneca is the Ad5 vector, if I recall. And there has been a small number of people who have developed life-threatening clots and an even smaller number of folks that have died. The first thing I would say is that the thing that causes way more clots is COVID.
Yeah. Yes.
COVID makes you clot like crazy.
Yeah.
It is like people's blood like clots in the lines.
We had to change how we did our experiments.
Yeah, we had to change how we did our experiments because like it was like clotting in our anti-clot blood tubes and stuff. So like there is a huge probably a mixture of endothelial insult, inflammatory insult, and alteration of the coagulation cascade that's happening in COVID that's made clotting a big part of the pathogenesis of the disease. So in terms of life-threatening clotting, the virus wins way before the vaccine. In terms of from the vaccine, I've predominantly seen this related to the AstraZeneca, but I think there has been a small number of clots observed. These clots also just happen through the course of our lives. We develop DVTs, we develop pulmonary emboli at a certain base rate, and it's a question of whether or not the vaccines have created that in excess of that base rate, and probably the AstraZeneca one did. The types of clots that they generated are, now we're aware of the problem. It's a treatable problem. You should definitely be aware of it. If this was months ago, though, you are far outside of the window in which we tend to see vaccine side effects. The overwhelming majority of all vaccine side effects have been observed throughout our history with vaccines within 90 days.
And I think the way that we do these vaccine trials, when they do these studies, they give people the shot of the vaccine, or they give them just inactive vaccine, so it doesn't have the genetic material, doesn't have the mRNA. But these people are watched incredibly closely. And so if you take 10,000 people and you ask them every day, how do you feel? Some of them are going to have a headache. Some of them are going to pass away. If you take 10,000 people and you watch them for 6 months, just people die. So the question becomes, is there a difference between the folks who got the vaccine and the folks who didn't get the vaccine, just got a shot of just the carrier that the vaccine was in? And is there a difference between those groups and the normal population? And so when people look at the COVID vaccine trials, they see that people who got the vaccine had a certain rate of, whether it's blood clots or mortality, but that would happen if you just looked at normal healthy people. That people get sick. That's what keeps us in business.
And this is the part of the natural vaccine rollout, is that you expect a certain number of people a week to die, and a certain number of people are then going to die proximate to having received the vaccine. And the reason why we have these databases to track vaccine adverse events is to basically investigate those and see whether or not the vaccine was related. But most of us in our lives have never been exposed to a vaccine rollout like this in adults. This is actually really unique. Most of us, we get our vaccines when we're kids and we're super healthy. If a kid has a reaction after a vaccine, that's really, super alerts the system, because kids aren't supposed to get sick,
Yeah.
And, but, we drop off. And
Unfortunately,
we're
yes.
going to expect a certain number of folks to drop off around the vaccine completely unrelated to it. And, we are, of course, monitoring it, but it's still a very safe, extremely, in terms of safety of medical devices and interventions, vaccines are hands down the safest for the greatest benefit.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I can't emphasize enough how much I've encouraged everybody that I care about, anybody who's listening to this, who if you know me and you're hesitant about getting the shot, please get the shot. And if you want to talk about it more, send me a message. Like, this is something that I want people to do because I think it will make you healthier and could save your life.
So, okay, a couple of the other questions that have been coming in beforehand is, I think, almost a natural one where people are, what about the children?
What about the children?
What about the children? And I've got various questions. I'm sure you could imagine the spectrum of questions that
I
come in.
can't wait to vaccinate my child. I can't
Yeah.
wait until that's approved.
Yeah.
There's no real physiologic reason to think that children's reactions. I mean, we vaccinate children all the time. That's usually our primary targets.
Yeah,
before
almost
you know,
everybody
it
who's
gets to 'em.
resisting getting a vaccine already has vaccines.
Yes.
Almost
Yes.
everybody.
Because we all got
Yes.
them as children,
Yeah.
and there's no reason to think that they will
And
do
they-
something substantially different.
And
This
they
is
didn't
just
die of
excessive
polio.
caution, right?
They're here resisting this vaccine after not dying of polio, not dying of measles,
Yeah.
not developing mumps.
And even though the disease is definitely less severe in children, it still has we see long COVID in children. We see MIS-C, an inflammatory syndrome that happens after COVID, often in a delayed fashion that's put a lot of kids into critical care units and requiring intubation, and a few have died. And even though it is less severe, in the last year, it's basically become the third leading cause of death in children. So because kids aren't supposed to die at all.
Right.
Yeah.
The fact that there's any increase in signal is huge because children aren't supposed to die really, and usually the leading killers of children are congenital heart effects, congenital heart defects, cancer, and trauma.
Trauma leading, far
like,
away accident.
Under the age of 44, trauma, our disease is number one.
Right.
But in children to have any kind of signal is alarming. Like there should be no signal in children, right? This is not. They should live long, healthy lives.
So yeah, but I think we should. Hopefully, there will be a vaccine approved for younger kids soon. I will sign my kids up as soon as possible. I admit to laying in bed at night and thinking, how can I get my 11? My son's going to be 11, and how can I slip him in the line? If I came home one morning and there was magically a bottle of COVID vax on the kitchen island, I would have no hesitancy in giving it to my kid.
Yeah, in a minute.
Maybe. I know somebody who makes fake IDs, so.
Yeah.
Some of the other questions with kids, though, are the continued risks of kids, because they are amongst the unvaccinated, and this is a pandemic amongst the unvaccinated.
Yeah.
They are amongst the unvaccinated. What sort of things can these are almost all parents or people with kids.
I think the CDC guidance for unvaccinated applies to kids, and the CDC just recently changed their recommendations for school, and they're recommending that unvaccinated kids wear masks at school, and I think that's a very reasonable precaution. Kids very rarely get sick. It's not zero, and I would look to vaccinate them as soon as possible, but they're relatively they can get the COVID infection, but they don't have near the same severity of disease. And this is very similar to other illnesses. If
Like polio, even.
Chicken pox.
Children have
right?
a much less severe course of polio, similar to this. But it's bad enough. You could still fill a unit of iron lungs with kids if you let it run rampant through your population.
Yeah, chicken pox makes young children just a little bit sick, but teenagers and adults who get chicken pox, varicella, can get very, very sick. But that doesn't mean that we don't immunize folks against chicken pox. We don't want kids to get it. We want people to be safe and to not get sick. I think everybody has their own risk tolerance, and that's another thing. Where you're comfortable, there's no zero risk, right? So kids are very unlikely to get sick from COVID. I'm comfortable with my kids being outside without masks in public spaces. I think inside in crowded spaces we tend to wear masks. We'll follow our school's guidance in terms of masking this fall. My kids will be going back to in-person school. I'm very comfortable with that. I know our teachers are vaccinated. I know a lot of our teachers personally, and the risks for kids are low. They're not zero, and everybody has to decide what they're comfortable with. And the risks there's risks to not being in school. So it's just balancing these things.
Yeah. I think that the risk is so extraordinarily low that I wouldn't pause for a moment in terms of my child. So the second it's available, we're going to do it. I don't want his first cold to be, COVID. It's terrible.
Have you guys been going out? Have you taken them out?
We tend to still kind of go for more outdoorsy types of things and don't, try to avoid the tight crowded spaces with
Yeah.
unvaccinated individual. He's 2.
Yeah.
Coming up on 2.
Yeah, I mean, we've been out to restaurants, but kids wear the masks when they're up from the table. They don't wear their masks at the table. We've eaten inside since vaccination's been prevalent in Missouri. But again, that's very much a personal balance.
And it changes too, right? Based on the amount of active cases in the community,
Well,
right? So community spread might affect your decision in doing that, right?
I don't. Yeah, in the
So far, the numbers for the county, St. Louis and the city and these surrounds were actually showing very low community prevalence still because we've had higher vaccine uptake. And currently, it's spreading, of course, where there's low vaccine uptake because this is very soon going to become purely a pandemic of the unvaccinated, which is a little bit unfair to say though too because it's still risk being a pandemic for the immune suppressed, people with disabilities, people with cancer who may not be able to fully benefit from the vaccine too, and we have a benefit from protecting ourselves from also protecting these folks who are more vulnerable.
And that non-zero risk to kids, the unvaccinated who are propagating this vaccine through their communities, that most kids don't get sick, but some otherwise healthy kids do get sick, and so those kids are at risk from the unvaccinated. Because the unvaccinated population is propagating this disease. I mean, if people want to know what they can do the most for their kids, it's get vaccinated. Encourage the people around them to get vaccinated. That's the thing that protects your kids the most.
Well, this goes into a question too, of course, convincing the others to get vaccinated, which seems to be basically the reason why we're sitting here right now, even having this conversation, which is kind of sucks that we've been able to mobilize a planet to kind of fight a virus, and we actually get a highly effective vaccine out there, but now we're fighting something else. They want to know, this person wanted to know, like, in communities of people of color and amongst the elderly and people that are just not that savvy, you have concerns about how to close the gap there and what's being done with folks like that.
I think the biggest gap with the communities of color early on was just differential access. I haven't actually seen a significant decrease in terms of their enthusiasm for it, and I think to some degree that's been a little bit overblown. The access versus the desire. They want to be protected too. They've actually taken the brunt of this illness, and there's very few patients of mine I can't talk to who can't talk about a relative or a friend that they've lost to this virus. And as it spreads from the population centers and out into rural areas, it's going to be true out there too, because the choice we're facing at this point is vaccine or infection. Eventually, if it continues to run like this and people don't get vaccinated, eventually everybody who's not vaccinated is going to get this. And that would be I would say the strongest thing to say is you have a choice between this extremely safe thing and this extremely dangerous thing. You wouldn't get on an airplane that had a 1 in 99 chance of falling out of the sky. You wouldn't get on, you wouldn't get in a car that would have 1 in 99 chance of crashing and killing you. I mean, this 1 in 99. Humans have very poor ability to distinguish between risks other than 50-50. And when you start talking about the difference between a 1 in 99 risk and even like a 1 in 999,000 risk, we have a lot of trouble kind of balancing that. I would just say, as the people who have been treating this disease and seeing patients with it since the beginning, you don't want this disease. It's a terrible disease. It's hurting a large number of people, far more than it is killing. We're looking at possible long COVID rates of maybe 1 in 20, 5% of folks showing persistent symptoms months and months out. We don't know how that's going to end. Injuries to your lungs, injuries to your heart, injuries to your brain. These are hard things to heal. You want to avoid this. You don't want to take your risk with the infection.
And I think it's hard, for me to sit here and if people have to look and say who are their trusted sources of information. And so if this, if Steve and the Royale, if this is a place where you think that we're a trusted source of information, that's great. If you're sitting here and thinking, well, I don't know about this source of information, I think ask who do you trust? So I think communities of people of color, in communities of people who are maybe not native English speakers. If you're in that group, or if you have friends or family who are in that group, ask them where they're getting their information and be sure that they're getting information from a reliable place. What is the motivations behind the people who are giving you that information? Is the guy on YouTube whose entire income depends on him getting likes and views, right? There's a, and he's going to sell you an herbal supplement that's going to cure your COVID. I mean, his entire livelihood is based on you engaging on his social media platform, retweeting her viral tweets. So ask, where are you getting that information? And ask your friends and family, like, hey, where are you getting this information? And is there a reliable source that we both agree is reliable? And can you get folks to engage with those sources? Because I'm not going to be the source for everybody, and there's going to be folks who aren't going to find me to be a reliable source, but I'd be glad to talk to them about what is a reliable source, or what do I think about their sources. So I think for other communities, you need to talk to folks in other communities about who the reliable sources are for their community, who they want to engage in, who their leaders are in their community. And the leaders in almost all communities are sending the same message, which is that COVID is dangerous, the vaccination is safe. And so, talk to the leaders in your community, and don't be swayed by the loudest voice on social media. Don't be swayed by the person whose entire livelihood depends on outrage.
Yeah, people who are trying
likes.
to make you mad, people who are trying to make you emotional, they're the people who are trying to take advantage
They're
of you.
manipulating you.
We're trying to encourage people to be thoughtful and weigh evidence. And you're not thoughtful and you don't weigh evidence when you're angry, And what you want to do when you want people to come to a rational decision is you want them to be calm. And that's one of the reasons why direct confrontation often doesn't work. When you argue with people and you get them angry, they dig in, they fight back, they push on you. And what you want is people to be calm and cool and collected. And one of the reasons why it's so helpful to have people within a community that are trusted is that they don't kind of rile up those feelings. It's one of the reasons why their communication is more effective, is that it's not seen as confrontational. This is seen as like part of us, one of us is saying this, and that makes that message easier to deliver and more likely to stick. So, we may not, I may irritate somebody by my very presence. I'll be a poor communicator to that person. But what we're trying to do is trying to say, in a calm and collected and rational way, discussing about this, these are what the facts are. We're not trying to get you angry. We're not trying to take your wallet. We're just trying to save your lives.
Yeah, there's different tactics of talking to different people. I'm trying to think of ways that people can come away from this to help. I mean, so many of us are just trying to help make things better in what actions we can take. And talking to these people that have not been vaccinated and trying to get there with them, you're talking about, ask them what their trusted information is coming from. What was some of the other things that we were going to say?
Use those relationships. If you have
Right.
a relationship of trust with someone, just try to
care
use that
about
relationship and again, like, not necessarily being confronting them or confronting their views or their values. Just say, I want you to do this because I care about you, because I want to continue to have you around and with me and seeing my kids and doing these things. And you can believe what you want about other things. I don't want to interfere with that, but this is something that's important to me because I believe it's true. And you matter to me, and your health matters to me. And those types of things work better than confronting people maybe directly over disinformation. So for the folks that have all started out by calling us liars and saying that and trying to spread disinformation, there's no reaching people who are in that mindset. They are they're fighting. And they're not interested in kind of opening themselves up to anything like that. So you got to get people when they're not in that mode, and that's how you got to approach your friends who you want to change about this. It's like not in the middle of a fight. You're not going to knock down, drag out, change somebody's mind. You're going to reach to them from a personal point and change their mind.
And that's part of the reason we're not going into specific conspiracy theories and addressing some of that stuff, because that's not why we're here. We're here to give good information and to convey our perspective about what we think will help people get back to normal, get back to where we were before all of this, and be healthy and be safe. And we're not here to fight about these specific things that people can come up with.
So I have a question, and this is personal question on my behalf, not on part of the chapter. This is how I think of COVID as a vaccinated person. You guys tell me if I'm wrong. And I said this to a friend of mine yesterday. I was having a conversation. He said his girlfriend is very worried about COVID at the moment, even though she's fully vaccinated. He's fully vaccinated. Most of their close friends are fully vaccinated. I said, think about it like this. And you guys tell me, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. This is the way I think about it. I said, remember back in the early days of COVID when the right-wing media was all saying, oh, it's just the flu, and most people survive, and if you get it, you'll probably boost your immunity to it anyway. So that's the kind of, I told my friend, I said, if you're vaccinated, that stuff actually is true now.
Yeah.
And that's the way
Just
I
take
know.
that false assurance and now just make it true reassurance.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, I think
That's a fair point.
I think that's actually probably. I
That's
can't
great.
tell the number, but yeah, if you're vaccinated, it is probably true that COVID is like influenza. It probably actually safer. COVID is probably
less,
safer.
yeah. at this
Because
point.
influenza is actually much more dangerous. We're used to it, so we don't think about it. People die of influenza. Hundreds of people die every year. No, I think if you're vaccinated, even being exposed to COVID, you're very unlikely to get sick at all. And if you do get sick, it's probably even less than influenza if you're vaccinated. It's not zero, but it's never zero. I mean, we're in Missouri, but there's a chance we could have an earthquake.
Oh yeah.
It'd make better video, by the way.
Yeah.
We would get some hits if there was an earthquake.
And I guess the one other thing that I know is a bit more of a trickier, the social circumstances in which we can help our health and the practices that we are doing. And then we are in a very beautiful social environment here. Helping, hurting, where are we at in terms of the practices in which we are doing, whether it's, being around other people, distances and all that kind of thing. And I know that there's CDC guidelines and
Yeah. I mean, I think, wellness is wellness, and being, having good mental health and, balancing that. Again, there's not zero risk. I mean, as we're all sitting here, we're not at zero risk. But you have to ask, what are your wellness practices? What are good for your mental health? What's good for your mental health? I mean, I know people who are very introverted and they're perfectly happy to be home, and I know people who are very extroverted and they need to be out. I mean, I've done a lot of work sitting at this bar, and that's an important part of my my writing process is to be out in a place with some distraction and be able to interact with people, and it stimulates my mind. So for me, I can tolerate a little bit of, I will tolerate a little bit of the small amount of risk of being out because that's important to me. I think we all have to find that balance for ourselves.
For me, the vaccine was very much like freedom. I felt like then I was able to go back to going to the gym. Still social distancing and masking in the gym, but now that everybody, in the gym is basically, vaccinated too. I mean, more masks. I mean, so as we've gotten more vaccinated and as more time goes on, I'm feeling freer and freer to do things that I would have been less comfortable with. So now sitting in a bar, relatively close to other folks I know is vaccinated, no worries, it's great. But that's another part of the messaging that we have to talk about is that the vaccine really kind of frees you from a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
And it is a bad disease. One of the things that hurts us is that we can't show you what it looks like. We can't. If we could routinely kind of bring cameras into hospitals and show people what disease looks like as an object lesson, it'd be a terrible violation of patient privacy, but a very powerful kind of lesson in the severity and how deadly serious this disease is. You don't want to be on ECMO. You don't want to be on a vent. These are if not pleasant things.
If it caused a rash or physical, or if there was a population of folks who suffered, neurologic complications like polio. I mean, it used to be very common to know people who had, an extremity paralysis related to having polio in a previous generation. But yeah, we can't show you COVID. People are quarantined, and they want, the people who have severe COVID, many of them don't make it through it, and when they are sick, they're in the hospital in places where they're kind of hidden from the public.
Kind of alone.
And very alone.
yeah, even more so now because you really can't have visitors like this you used to, at least.
And
It's got to be really sad for people to lose their family members. And
Yeah,
not
we've
see them
had
again.
a lot of end-of-life discussions over Zoom.
I've had that
Yeah.
happen. I've had
It's
patients.
horrible.
I've had patients die alone in the last couple of weeks. Die alone in a room because were not able. Their family was not able to be in there with them due to COVID.
Huh.
Let's not finish on that.
No. No.
We're right at
But the
about an
vaccine is
hour.
freedom, and the
Okay.
vaccine makes it so that
freedom.
won't
The
happen.
vaccine is freedom.
How do you feel about having a beer at the bar outside?
Yeah, because that's the important.
That's.
Let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're a vaccinated person?
I'm vaccinated. I feel okay having a beer at the bar inside.
Okay.
That's my.
I was in the Moderna trial. Unfortunately, I got the placebo. So I got Pfizer, so I'm vaccinated and happy and good. So
So you got all four. You got 4 shots.
I got 4 shots, 2 useless, 2 useful.
There we go.
And you know, I mean, for me, like, I mean, go back to that question I asked a little while ago. You know, I feel like there's people that are vaccinated that worry about it way more than they should at this point, as if it could still kill them.
Yeah.
You know?
I think you can still spread. So I'm still worried,
You
like,
can't, yeah, I feel
there's
like
a small
I think if
chance
you're
I could pick it up.
symptomatic, right?
And then there would be a small chance I could give it to my 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And that would really piss me off.
Yes. Okay. So
Yeah.
that's a good
Right.
thing. But you said so, Isaiah. You said something the last time we had this talk that I thought was very interesting. Maybe people will find a little more comforting. Maybe is that if you're exposed even after your vaccine, that's even a little bit more immunity you might gain, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that's I mean, if people are constantly exposed, every time your body sees that virus, your immune system gets a little bit reinforced. But yeah, I think if you're vaccinated, that you have a small chance of getting sick, and you have a small chance of having an asymptomatic infection that you could pass to other people. It's not zero. And if you're vaccinated and your friends are vaccinated, then that really does approach zero. So the people who are at risk, my worry about this is for the unvaccinated, right? My worry is I'm going to pass something to the unvaccinated. My kids are still unvaccinated, although likely having been exposed because I myself had COVID before the vaccine was available, which was, I was fortunate that I didn't get very sick. I'm hopeful that my family, wasn't exposed, but, you run a risk of exposing the unvaccinated even if you're vaccinated.
Yeah, in medicine we're used to these Swiss cheese models of risk, and this is kind of the problem with like that disinfo we got earlier, where they try to like minimize the risk of things, or like say that the vaccine, like dismissing the efficacy of an extremely effective vaccine. These vaccines work
Really good.
better than any we've
Like
had.
it's like
They're
magic.
great. They're great vaccines, but the thing is like there is a 5% risk, and then you combine that 5% risk with then you have exposure to somebody under 12 who isn't vaccinated. Then there's that small risk of MIS-C or a more serious complication, and the holes have to line up. But rare things happen every day, and with enough numbers and enough people as we have in this country, we're going to get a lot of terrible things to happen if we don't fully vaccinate. So nothing's 100% effective. That doesn't mean it's ineffective. It's very effective.
There was one other question in the comments here. Maybe we can address it real quick before the end. I'm going to throw it up on the screen. Somebody said that, and this kind of goes to vaccinated risk and things too. So this person says, my cousin had COVID, a very mild case, and got the vaccine, and now has it again. Worst case than before. How possible and how likely is that to happen?
Yeah, so
I think
And obviously
possible
you
and
don't know.
unlikely.
Possible-
This is like
possible and
this is
unlikely.
like the Swiss
Yeah.
cheese. Like
Yeah.
in a big enough country with enough people, you will see extraordinarily rare things still happen. And the thing is that because we see the lottery winner and not all the people that didn't have a winning lottery ticket, we think lottery winners are common.
Right.
And so we hear about rare events because people talk about them because they're rare, they're unusual. It's just our nature. So you end up with this kind of bias towards believing in these rare events are more common than they actually are.
The worst thing,
But the reality is that's a combination of Swiss cheese holes lining up to create that situation that's unusual. In 300 million people, we're going to get a few of those for sure. Absolutely possible. Very unlikely.
Yeah, like we said, that it looks like 14% of there's a 14% risk of, if you're exposed, of getting COVID if you've had the COVID Delta, the new Delta strain, among folks who've been vaccinated. 14% is not zero. Like if 100 people, that means 14% of them may have a positive COVID test. But what they're not going to have is life-threatening critical illness where they have to come and be in the hospital.
Yeah.
So
You don't want us to be your doctors.
in fact,
Something terribly has gone wrong in your life if you see one of us.
yeah. So yeah,
And we mean that from the bottom of our hearts. Like,
I don't
avoid
want-
us.
I want to see you guys at the bar. I don't want to see you anywhere
You don't
else.
want to see us as physicians.
but I think if everybody gets vaccinated, if you get vaccinated, you can be very safe. If you get vaccinated, you can protect other people. If you're not vaccinated, you're both putting yourself at risk and putting other people at risk, the people you care about, the kids that we all want to talk about and worry about. And if we all get vaccinated, things will return to normal. And we've seen that. It did. It's only in areas where it's unvaccinated that we're having issues. So get your shots. It's a tiny little needle.
All right, so that's a little more than an hour. Steve, you want to wrap up?
Oh, no, I just wanted to thank these guys. It's still, sadly, this pandemic is continuing amongst the unvaccinated, and it just kind of, I think, sadly, we're still talking about it, but
Yeah.
I'm still happy to be here with everybody and making sure that we do have some level of humanity left in this world, and we do seem to be persevering. I'd like to thank you guys a lot for coming down and explain to, at least some section of people here
Yeah.
of what we're doing. And thank you, Bill, for making sure that happens very well, too. And I hope to see people, we're still dealing with a lot of these things, but, if you want to still come down and have some humanity, we got it here for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.